Welcome to another episode of The Practical Metaphysical Journey, the place where practical meets the paranormal, the mundane meets the metaphysical, and the spiritual meets the spooky. A place where we share the experiences of our journeys here on Earth. We encourage you to listen and see what resonates, because we're all different yet the same. We invite you to take a break with us, so unpack and stay a while. We're glad you stopped by for a visit. Thank you for coming back and listening to part 2 of the 3 words we avoid using in conversation. In part 1, we did talk about the 3 words that we avoid using. Here in part 2, we flip that script around and we start talking about the words we do use in conversation, or work at being more aware of that we are using in our conversation and how that can help the conversations either move forward or sometimes, unfortunately, make them shut down. Thank you for coming back and hope you enjoy this part 2. So, in thinking about one of the thoughts that then came to mind for me is being aware of the words I'm using around other people, and not necessarily to what it may trigger in the other person, but how do my word choices set up the stage for that communication with the other person? Like you're saying, this person's going, I'm lost. So for you, that's causing you to respond in a certain way. Where if she truly, is lost and is just not getting it, maybe the other way of saying is, I know you've explained this to me multiple times,
right?
And I've tried doing things this way, but I seem to just not understand this part of the process or something. So that it's helping you
help her
understand where she is truly.
Because I'll work all day to help find that disconnect and see how we can make that work. That's just my nature of things. But when she says that she's lost and just kicks back in her seat and doesn't try and is staring, counting ceiling tiles and doing whatever she's doing, I'm like...
You're like, there's no one else that's going to come do this for you. You have to figure it out.
Right.
If this is your job, then...
And now you have just delegated me to have to pick up this part of what you're doing.
Right.
So you basically have put me in a position that I can do. I know how to do this. I've learned how to do this. I've expended my time, energy, and knowledge and whatever to be able to know how to do this, and you get to not do this.
But this is not my job. You were not hired for that. So
it's a very specific thing, but it's only because it's been coming to mind. And I mean, I'm not the only one she's saying this to. We all have tried to figure out how to help her, and that is just her word that she keeps going to. So she knows that it's working, and it's keeping her from being called out, because they're like, well, why aren't you guys helping her? So then we're not incompetent. We're doing the best we can, but it's putting another whole set of circumstances and words on us that don't belong there. We're not incompetent. We're not selfish. We're not whatever, So it's interesting how these words will link together to form these situations and the stories people will tell with them.
And because we're all different, we've all had different experiences, we've been on our own journeys, the impact of the word lost could have a different trigger for you.
Sure.
Or you, Lisa, or me, or whatever. So it's tough. We need to say words because we have to communicate. And I'm not saying that you have to sit, for me, that I'm worried about every single syllable that leaves my mouth, because I will make mistakes. I will say things at times and go, I said that the wrong way, or I had an effect I didn't intend for it. But it's being aware that you're having an impact. You are creating when you say things, whatever that is, and be aware of that and accept the responsibility of the result that your words are going to have, good or bad, and again, intentional or unintentional.
Right.
You said them.
Yeah, because it's not about being politically incorrect and choosing trigger words. And there are things people are going to react differently in every situation to different whatever their perception and understanding is. But Yeah, it's interesting. It's not like we're the trying to be woke or this or that or having to change our dialogue and conversation because of certain words, but just being able to express yourself, I think, in a genuine way, and that's the thing. But we can't be held responsible for a lot of the way people react to like simple words like disappoint or lost or whatever. It's just. It's kind of a crazy place to be. Want, I want this. Well, so you want it, go do it. It's just kind of a crazy thing. Or there is no try, just do. Well, that's pretty judgy. I get it, Yoda, but man. So it's, interesting.
I think it's a part of it is finding the best word to communicate what you're saying with the best clarity of it. Some of us get lazy, just kind of fall into the, like you're saying, just like a slang kind of thing or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, you're not placing that on the other person, but it could trigger them or it could hit them in a certain way.
Sure.
I find myself, sometimes when I realize what's happening, I'm like, oh, let me rephrase that. I'm like, that probably wasn't the best word, so let me see if I can either, add some more words to it to just kind of expand on it, but to just kind of bring that awareness, like, oh, I didn't mean it in that context, or I didn't mean it that way, or I didn't understand really, let me rephrase it. Let me find some other word to use.
Conscious conversation.
There you go. That's good.
I think that's it. Because again, it goes back to our other podcast that we just did recently about being present and being in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Not just ripping off phrases and things like that, just riffing them off to, fill a conversational hole, and using, being a part of that conversation. You're listening, you're having the exchange, and I think when people too, they hear the context in which you're using them, or they should, you hope, and knowing that you're trying not to be damaging to anyone in any way, being conscious,
And on the flip side of that too, for me, is me being more aware of what's possibly triggering me that somebody else is saying. So not just what I say that triggers you,
right,
but vice versa.
How am I hearing it?
Yeah, because for me at work, I work with many people in other countries. So English is not their first language.
Right.
So I have to remember at times they may say something a certain way that for like a native English speaker, that might be kind of a bad way of saying it, but for them that may be the only way they know how to say it. So
Right.
I've got to keep that in mind at times, because like this past week I was in a meeting and somebody said something that upset me, and I realized that it triggered me, and I've gotten over it. But because part of that is that I'm thinking is like, why did it trigger me, and was it just simply like she didn't know any other way to say it? So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. It is. It's paying attention, and I think too that a really good awareness can come to us from that too. When our word is triggering, it's like, ooh, why? Where did I hear that from? We all went back to that minute when you said disappoint. We all had a moment. It's like, oh, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting.
So instead of disappoint, kind of what you were saying,
How do you flip it?
How do you
change
phrase
it? Yeah.
yeah,
What
how do you
want?
change it? How do you?
In that type of setting, I would probably react to that print and say, I'm concerned with how this was presented. How can I help you? It looked like you were struggling. This wasn't exactly what I expected, but how can we get on the same page with this? And there's so many different ways to handle those things in a work way that values the other person.
Yeah.
And if you really want to help them, this person clearly didn't want to help anyone. It just was a superiority thing. They set themselves above that person. But yeah, any other time it's like, hey, this came out a little bit differently than I expected. So how can we help? Let's get on the same page. Or it wouldn't be disappointed. I'm so disappointed. You do it. That'd be my flip. Are That's it.
Yeah.
Like if this particular girl said, well, I'm, not that she's lost, it's like, I'm having such a hard time getting this to stick. No problem then. You know what? This is just not a strong point for you, so I'm happy to pick this part up and take over it. That's not her passively, aggressively delegating something to someone else that she just doesn't want to do. It's okay. I can have empathy for that. There are things that just don't click for me either. Let's work on this together. So,
I just looked up quickly like the antonyms of disappoint just to see what if I was thinking on the long right. I think it's kind of what you're saying though, like the word aid or assist. How can I assist you? Instead of just leaving it as I'm disappointed, this looks like whatever, you could say this needs to be redone, or this, you really need to get this and grasp this. This is part of your job that you have to do every day. So how can I assist you? Another word was explain, right? Or even encourage or help. This is a good one, succeed. Especially if it's in a work environment.
Absolutely.
How can I best assist you in succeeding here? What can we do differently?
And I like that idea of the looking it up and looking for the antonyms, because it triggered the thought of, as we come up with these words and as people listen to this podcast, it'll probably trigger them to start thinking of words, that they would like to avoid or trigger them, like disappoint. And so technique for maybe working around it if you can't think of something right away. Look up the word. Look for the antonyms, because that'll give you the flip side of it.
Yeah.
And then help you. Yeah. So that was a technique, I think.
Yeah.
On the fly technique.
Absolutely.
I like to do that because I did like English in school, but that was a long time ago. And I think a lot of times we just say things.
Yeah.
We're not having a conscious conversation or a conscious even thought in the moment. We're just, and I don't have a broad vocabulary. I would say I have not striven to do that, but I do like to find this stuff out. So like a thesaurus, I love using the online dictionaries. Now the antonyms, I had not done that before, so that was something different. I was looking at synonyms just to see what else could you use instead of, but I going the other way with it. I liked flipping it instead
to make it more productive. And that's the thing, that's when you realize people's intent in things, because they could have that person who said disappoint has also heard positives, and if somebody's in that kind of leadership position where they've delegated somebody to do something, they know darn well how to work it towards the positive as opposed to the negative, because
if
there's
you don't
enough
like it
out there to teach people how to be leaders, phrases to use. We have approved lists of words that we can use at the hospital with patients, phrases to say. And one of them that I am always stuck with, a patient, we'll be checking in a patient, for instance, and they'll say, "Oh, thank you very much for your help." I'm like, "No problem," or "You bet, I got this. No good. No, we're good." Whatever. When we should be saying, "My pleasure." Go on the Chick-fil-A route.
Yeah.
Or absolutely, they hate the "no problem" or "Oh, you bet." And some of it's regional from where I come from. It's like, "Oh, thanks for doing that." "Oh, you bet." "Yeah, okay." It's just a habit. And I know I used to drive the educators crazy with that, because there was an approved list. Instead of this, say this. And so, it's an interesting thing. So, there's guidelines out there. If you're interested, you can be taught in it.
Yeah, I think like you're saying before, the intent behind the words too. So there's not just the word itself, but the intent behind it and the volume level that you say it, or all of those things.
Words have energy. Some words, sacred words, are sacred. They give out that energy. Other words, angel is a beautiful word. You actually have a connotation of something beautiful and holy, and the word itself can be really soothing. Demon, you're not going to feel the same way.
Or angel of death might be a little different. But
there you go. Another spin on it. And, the word Om for meditation, does anybody really know what Om is or anything like that unless they've meditated? No. But the sound of the word, the energy behind the word, there's math behind words. I'm not getting into that because math is a 4-letter word. I don't play that game. I don't do numbers and all that. So but there is an energetic resonance to some words too. So, I mean,
when you said the word death, my thought went is the death card in tarot.
Right, exactly.
And so many people have that initial reaction if that card comes up going, I'm going to die. Or it's like, no, it's simply change is coming.
End of a circumstance, the death of a circumstance. Or
Right.
It's a rebirth from something,
right.
You know? Yeah, it's interesting.
So for most people, it has that energy and that one meaning, but really, it's the intent
nobody
behind.
Goes, woohoo, death.
Yeah.
Any circumstance. Yeah. It's interesting, and just like I said, I know there's the math behind words and numerology behind words and that type of thing, but it's just other than what we've learned, there are words that are just soothing and sounds that are soothing, and words that end in vowels and things like that are supposed to be more pleasing to the ear than words that end in plosives like disappoint or disappoint, or so there's an interesting, the energy of the words is, if you're energy sensitive, you're getting that in addition to
I'm Googling this. Doreen Virtue had a book she did that talked about the energy of words, and it literally showed the graph underneath it of when you spoke it into this certain machine, what it did, and it showed like the high points and low points. Like the word angel was very symmetrical, if I remember correctly. I'm gonna look up the name of that real quick while we're talking. But
it's like the language of water, and I'm butchering this, but what? Yes,
Emoto, right?
Yes. When a word is placed under a bottle of water or a glass of water or ice cube or something like that, the configuration when it's frozen that shows up is sometimes very jagged, or it can be more flowing, and even sound waves that you put into water, they're doing this with sand and with water and all these different things to see what the vibrations of the sounds do. So words.
Well, and that's what you have to realize. And we've all heard of things like sound therapy, and we know certain music can be soothing. It's a vibration, and so is speech.
Sure.
So if music can have an effect on you and evoke certain emotions out of you, well, to me, then it's obvious speech can do the same thing. It's a vibration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's why some people are great orators and some people aren't. Or like if they're cadence, there's certain cadence, and all of that is. They could be saying terrible things, but if they say it in the right tone and the right cadence, people are like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
When I was going through my course on hypnotism, they talk about that. Because as you're talking and the words you're using, yes, will have that impact on the person you're working with. The idea is to get them relaxed into a certain state so that you can work with that state during hypnosis. But absolutely, like the cadence,
there's a rhythm,
the words you're using.
So Doreen's book is literally called Angel Words.
Okay.
So that's what it's called. Visual evidence of how the words you choose can be angels in your life.
Yeah.
And it shows the different things. But.
Well, it's interesting because when I'm in a group of people and they're talking about F and this and F and that and blah blah and various other words that go into things, it's like it's not pleasant to hear. I mean, I hear that with some factions with people at work who are in positions that it's like, wow, okay, this is not soothing to me. If I was a patient, this wouldn't be soothing to me. And you're supposed to be a professional. There's an expectation that certain words will go with that position as well. And there's just better words to use, and better being vibrational, just sounding the construction of the word. So it's like, ooh, it lays out the perception of who somebody is, depending on the words they use.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reading the description of this book, not to keep going back to it, but just the similarities are really hitting me. Basically, Doreen and her son Grant used to have a podcast, and as they're doing the podcast, they're watching the words on the graph or whatever program they were using. I don't know how to say it. So they realized that whenever she said the word angel, that the graphic literally looked like angel wings.
Wow.
Like it went
Cool.
above and below the line or whatever, and it created like angel wings. So they studied other words and realized that those with a spiritual or loving basis had very large graph to it. So they decided to try some negative words, and those were very tight and restricted and just very close to the line.
Interesting.
Yeah, so very, very interesting. So
Well, when I edit this podcast, I'll have to look at,
Yeah.
because I do get the graph that shows you.
okay,
You
yeah.
know, I don't know the name for it either.
I don't know
but
the name
The
either.
graph where you see the waves and how loud something is and all of that.
Interesting. Yeah.
And they talk about Emoto too. That's what I was like.
Okay. Yes.
So they're
yes.
bringing in that water
Mhm.
experiments
Yeah.
that he did too.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And there, I know that big Reiki guy, I want to say Sweden or something like that. He has actually got grant funding now for using the words for the Reiki symbols in water and seeing the differences in the ionic charge in water or something like that. And I'll get that name to you in case we want to throw it in there. I cannot remember right now, but they're doing these massive experiments, and it's showing that it does have an effect on water. We're made of water.
Yeah,
So
right. We're mostly
it would only
Yeah,
make sense.
Yeah. One of the other experiences that I had where to me it showed the power of words goes back to where you're talking, some people are great orators and stuff. So I had an assignment in New York City. So I went in, and during lunch I went out, was just walking around, and there was a strike going on with one of the unions. And there was one of their leaders or whoever on top of a van with a microphone and a loudspeaker, and he was just whipping them into a frenzy.
Yeah.
And it was, I just stood there and I was amazed at how this guy was able to get so many people thinking a certain way and under his control. Which I think it was one of the construction unions, and the building that I was standing near was under construction, and they were using non-working or non-union. So that was where the conflict was coming from. And he got them to, as a group, go over and try tipping one of the vans
Oh, wow.
of one of the workers that was in the building.
Wow.
As soon as the police showed up, they all disbanded. But again, it was one of those experiences. I'm sitting there going, wow, there's like one person can say things a certain
Sure.
way and get all these people to do what he wants.
Wow.
And it was words. It was just words.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, you probably wouldn't even have to speak the same language because they're using the words, and the energy behind the words
Yeah.
is translating. So, yeah, it's just, wow. That is something. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big word fan because I use all of them. So I do try to be really conscious when I'm speaking with people, and I have times that, especially at work when we're goofing around, I've had a long day. I use some words that, more playfully, but I'm always very conscious of my audience too. So of what we're talking about and doing that type of thing, chit-chatting back and forth. But I make it really clear what my intent behind words are. So,
Yeah.
so nobody can take offense or do whatever. Because that's never my intent to offend anyone. So
Yeah. And I brought up the example before of how you say I'm sorry in German and how
Yeah.
that translates. And there's probably other instances where I could come up with examples where it's interesting how we say something a certain way and how it gets expressed in another language, where you can see what their intent was or probably what the thinking was when that phrase or that saying, that word came into being.
Yeah, and something like you were saying to those that it literally cannot be translated the same.
In that instance, correct.
Yeah. So got to be some give and take there a little bit when you're doing that with someone that speaks a different language. That's interesting. I never thought about it before. I never thought about that.
Yeah, and it would be interesting because going back to the idea of that vibration that a word has, and again, I'm thinking of different languages. The same word can have a totally different meaning in another language. So where they're saying when you say the word angel, it comes out with this, uniform picture or whatever. Wondering, like in another language, if you say angel, does it do that?
Sure.
Or I'm thinking, back with German, the word gift. Here, it's a nice thing.
Yeah.
In German, that means poison.
Oh, well, there we go.
It's GIFT, same word,
Wow.
but a very negative.
Yes.
So
depends on who you're gifting
I
it
was
to.
going to say, hey, they might be making somebody happy somewhere.
yeah, because when I had learned that we had somebody, a foreign exchange student visiting, and we're traveling around Florida. There's gift shops
Oh,
my
all over the
Lord.
place.
Gosh.
And she's like, gift shops? Why do you have
trying
so
to
many
poison
gift
everybody
shops? It's like, okay, this is what a gift shop is in Florida. But yeah, like testing it that way. Like if I'm speaking German and I say the word gift, does it have the same outline
Yeah.
in that wave graph? Because the intention is very different. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dude, there's got to be a
Interesting.
grant out there
We'll have to
somewhere. I
write-
think I see our next side hustle here. There's got to be a grant for that somewhere. So
Yeah. Or is it's simply the intention behind you saying that word, how it shows up on the wave graph.
I know, whether you say gift. Like just put a different inflection on it. What does it look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, that would be kind of cool to see that in action.
So maybe next Christmas.
There you go.
Yeah.
For a gift.
We'll get it as a gift.
No, what to live.
Okay. Well, I think we've covered the topic to the extent that I was thinking. It's really just becoming more aware
Yeah.
of the words that you're using, and for us, what are those words that we actively avoid and why?
Mm-hmm.
And understanding where that people come from, and hopefully then as people listen to this, have them start to think also, like how I say things.
Yeah.
And just being more aware of that power that you have that you may not realize you have, in the stuff that you say, and everybody, not just your friends and your family, but how you respond to somebody at a grocery store or whatever.
What do you hear from TV, from the radio, from any of these other sources,
Yes.
from social media?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And not just the effect you're having when you say something,
Right.
but what's the effect on you when you hear that. So like you're saying,
Oh, yeah.
I'm listening to the news, and if I start getting upset, then maybe I need to realize I'm getting upset because I'm listening to that. So I either just turn it off, or I've got to figure out how to not let that impact me like it
And
is.
being conscious that they're specifically putting words together in a certain way
Yes.
for a certain reason.
Right. What's their intention?
It's all scripted. I mean, everything that you hear out there, mostly everything you hear on social media and all that stuff, it's scripted. There's an intent, or there's a motive for the way people are
They
saying
want
the
to
things
invoke
they
certain
are.
emotions with what they're saying.
Absolutely. That is the job. Influencers. I mean,
Yeah.
there you go. That's their job to influence you.
So I was thinking the same thought pattern you was about flipping it the other way of on the receiving end of people's words and how people get offended. And you're coming at it with a certain intention. I've had that happen a couple of times. Like I was at lunch with a friend one time, and I honestly can't remember the details right here in the moment, which probably better not to put that out there. But whatever it was, whatever I was trying to convey, they were literally shouting enough where people at their tables were turning and looking, and I'm like, that is not what I'm saying. And they're like, it's exactly what you said. Or talking one of those things. I'm like, but I didn't mean it in the way that you react. So I was confused. I was lost.
That you were lost.
But what happened was the next day, I got a beautiful text from them thanking me and having gratitude because I had triggered them to a past experience. And when they realized that I truly wasn't coming at them from that same energy, right, from their trigger, it was actually a growing experience for them, and they were very grateful for it. And then I felt like, like I I don't know. I had some weird emotions around it, but I thought, well, good. I'm glad because I don't ever want to purposely hurt someone. I wasn't.
Right.
And then I just didn't have the capability in the moment to understand that they were triggered. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was the words I used. But how best to be on the receiving end of words where you can, again, clarity comes back up for me. It's like, okay, here's what I'm hearing, but is that really what you're saying? You know, could I get a little more clarity around that, or I need to hear a little bit more,
One of the things that used to drive me crazy in my previous job was that we would have people complain about something that had been said to them, and the response from our upper leadership was, well, that's their perception, and their perception is 100% right. I'm like, wait a second, what happened to the person with the intent behind what they said? So, and Ricky Gervais said this on The View to those lovely ladies, hear my tone, and that they were complaining about being offended by some comedy or things that were being said. And he said, just because you're offended by something doesn't mean you're right. And it's true. It's like, okay, you may feel like you're right in that moment. What did what was being said really do to you? Own it. And that doesn't mean that, I mean, we, of course, nobody hate speech and all that type of thing. It's horrible. It's horrible. What is the intent? What is being said to you? Where's it coming from? Look what, comedians can't be comedians anymore. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that they were all right in everything they did, but
they're trying to invoke emotion too, though. I mean, they're saying things too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're saying edgy things because they're trying to keep people on the edge of their seat and engaged in what they're doing. And movies, scripts, you couldn't make Blazing Saddles now. You couldn't make a lot of these other things. What was funny, I mean, times change with things and language might evolve and grow a little bit, but you got to look at what's coming from the reaction, like you said. Where did that come from? They were upset by something because of their perception of what happened and didn't take into consideration your intent behind it. So, yeah, it's just, it can be tricky. And I don't think you're ever going to be right all the time. Because there's a lot of people out there who look to be offended. Certain words are going to trigger them. And they've also learned how to use words, too, to either defend their position or whether they want to be a right fighter or be offended or be a part of a certain group of people.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the beginning where that word apologize.
Right.
Just with sincerity, be sincere with the apology and maybe agree to disagree at some point, you know.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, we can't solve all problems.
No.
But
no.
it is to be conscious and thoughtful in what we're saying.
Just live our lives doing the best we can do. You know, work with what you got and do the best you can do.
Live your life with good intent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. Perfect.
Good ending.
And going back, it loops back to the good and bad episode that we talked about.
Yep.
Because like the word gift, us it's good, German it's bad. It's the same word.
Right.
You know, it's the meaning and the intent behind it. So yeah, so having, and you're right, you're never going to be totally perfect. You are, I say things I know that trigger people, and I say things wrong sometimes. But, you know, for everybody to just, I feel what helps me is have that open mind to realize they say something, yes, I may not like it, but let's kind of, I'm perceiving it as bad.
What do I own about
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe they said it to be good, but I perceived it as bad. It's the same thing. It's the perception of that particular item. And this kind of concept of what we're talking about and how to, you know, transmit the information and also receive it and not be triggered or be aware that you're being triggered, all that type of stuff. Is one of the root purposes that I wanted for the podcast and the three of us to do it and talk about our experiences to demonstrate that you can have conversations about topics. We haven't really reached a topic yet where maybe we all disagree completely, but out of, you know, what we have talked about and things, we do have slightly different opinions on things and perceptions and approaches, but we're still having a conversation. We still are friends. You know, help I'm hoping out of this, people get that nugget of, just because that bothered me from that person, like, why, and does it really mean I can't talk to them ever again?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Be open to the opportunities that you were mentioning before. Using the word like never, whatever, you cut out now any opportunities that may come out of that.
Well, that's it. And if if you're in a situation where maybe that person that you're with is using those words that aren't acceptable to you or are constantly triggering, then you know what? Be aware enough to know you've got the choice to not be a part of that. So, as best you can, whether it's not being part of that situation, not having that person around, nobody should be 100% triggered all the time anyways. That's not...
Right. That's another whole podcast that we're talking about abuse and different things. But
when it goes beyond perception to something else. But, that's it. You give grace as much as you can to other people who are just trying to live their lives. But then again, know your audience and know how you deliver things.
Yeah. And I like that point, and it goes back to things we talked about in the ghost episode, was you're empowered.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
To, and how you work through a situation, how you react to a situation. Try to, and I try to be that. I try to come from that perspective, especially at work, because, like I said, people say things at times, and it sometimes upsets me. And there was something else that happened a couple of weeks ago that somebody said something, and it really bothered me. It set me off. I had trouble working the rest of the thing. It just bothered me that much. And it wasn't so much that what they said bothered me. What bothered me was that I allowed it to bother me.
Yeah. So you're beating yourself up twice.
Yeah. And
you took all the responsibility for it. They got none.
Yeah. And so eventually I got to the point of going, wait a second. I allowed them to take my power away.
That's it. Yeah.
Because I was hearing somebody else talking about the act of forgiving, and forgiving people that wronged you. And, of course, my first thought is,
good luck with that.
I'm not. And I'm like, wait a second. If I forgive that person, doesn't mean I forget what they did.
Right.
But by forgiving them, I take my power back so that you never do that to me again.
It's forgiving you the opportunity to live your life and move on.
You can say that again to me, but I'm not going to react to it.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
So like we're saying, be aware of what you're saying, and also, how you're receiving it and whatever, but also, realize you have the opportunity to not react to things, or, keep your power. And like, you can say that you don't like something I did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But, there's a lot of other parts of my life that are good. Maybe I did this one thing wrong. That one thing is not going to define who I am.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay. Any other?
I'm not at all disappointed in this podcast today. Neither of you have disappointed me in the slightest. I am elevated by our conversation.
Did you have anything else? Okay. Remember, I can edit parts out.
Yes. Dummy.
Speaking of power.
Yeah.
I have power to make you guys say anything I want by edit. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed our conversation around what started as the 3 words that we try to avoid, but went into a whole lot more about words and the impact that they can have, being aware of that. How do we receive that information? Not only, communicate and outward expression of the meaning of words. So, out of that, if you find some pieces of information that resonate with you, like the idea where Lisa had looked up words and actually flipped to looking at the antonyms of that word. So if there is a negative word that you don't like, what might help, and I've probably used this now as a technique, is look that word up and look up the antonyms, and that'll give you a starting point
It shifts the energy immediately.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
At least it did for me. As soon I was like, oh yeah, and then I could do this, or I could,
Yep.
you know,
Yep. Yep. So leave us comments down in the that part of the screen. If you're, let us know what words you try to avoid or you enjoy using because you like the way that the energy that it has out there as you communicate with people. Also, as we ask with other episodes, is there's topics that you would like to hear us talk about or expand on, something you're interested in, feel free to also leave that in the comment section. And we'll take that and read your comments and see if there's things that we can incorporate into other episodes. Thank you so much and make it a great day.